Hello everybody and welcome to your first lesson for the third topic of media studies. This topic is all about media analysis, and this lesson will take us through the basics of media analysis, learning about semiotics and basic analysis skills. As with every topic that we cover in media studies, the first thing we need to do in our very first lesson is to complete our personal learning checklist. Now this is a checklist to see what we already know about this topic. What already do you have knowledge of and understanding of that might come up within the following scheme of work and in the following lessons? So in your student booklets, you should be able to find the personal learning checklist for this topic. It should be the third personal learning checklist, and you can see in the top right corner there should be a number 3. And what you need to do is read through every single sentence and tick the little box red, amber or green. And that's red if you don't know anything about it, amber if you think you know something and have some understanding, and green if you feel confident with it. Now at this early stage, this first lesson of this topic, it's most likely more of the things you're going to tick are going to be red or amber. You also need to include the date. It's very important that you include today's date next to each tick, because in the future, about halfway through the scheme of work and again at the end of the scheme of work, you're going to revisit this list and see if you've improved. So something that you've ticked red today, you might end up ticking amber in a week's time or green by the end of the scheme of work. And at that point, you'll need to write the next date. So you need to read the sentences, tick the little box, date the big box for every single tick, either red, amber or green. Take a few minutes to do that now. Here we have our first activity of the lesson, and it's just something to get our heads in the game in terms of what analysis means. So here we have a film poster. You should be able to identify what genre of film this poster is advertising. But more importantly, you should be able to explore and explain why you know that. As you can see from the examples, there's quite a lot of terminology associated with the analysis of media. That's specific words you can use and should use to get the best grades possible and the best results from your responses to any analytical question. So here I'm talking about the smashing mirror, and I'm saying that signifies violence. This term signify is going to come up quite a lot, and it's really anything that has significance, anything that points us towards some real meaning. And we're saying that the mirror, because it is smashing, it can signify violence because it symbolises bad luck. We all know about the idea of 9 years bad luck from smashing a mirror. But it also has connotations of the inner soul with the idea of reflection. And here, because the mirror is being smashed, it's almost like saying your soul is being smashed or destroyed, or your life is being lost. The imagery within the shards, you can see if you look closely, each of the triangular shaped shards has its own image kind of within it. And this denotes the reflections, but also connotes vision or seeing what's coming. There is a skull, of course, in the background, which can signify death as it denotes the skeleton. Now you may have noticed we've used some words here, connotations, denote, connote. Now these are words all to do with what things mean, and we're going to cover them later in the lesson. The black and grey colour scheme, that can signify shadows as it denotes nighttime, but also connotes fear. It has a sense of enigma, which is a type of mystery or hidden clues. Again, a lot of this terminology we're going to be covering throughout this topic. There's words on this poster as well, of course, the final destination, which obviously signifies the name of the film, but it can also denote that this is the final instalment or the last film in the franchise. And it can connote the finality of death, the end of all things. Here we have our title slide for this lesson, and as you can see the title is Semiotics and Analysis. In the bottom left, as always, you can see our topic number, which is topic number 3, and this is the first lesson for this topic. We have our learning objective, which is to learn the basics of media analysis by exploring the concept of semiotics and meaning creation. And then we have our basic, moderate and advanced success criteria there. So what exactly is media analysis? Well, when we say analyse the media, what we're saying is try and find what things mean. We look at what different elements on their own can mean, but also it's a combination of different elements. So for example, you could talk about the colour, you could talk about the imagery or the words, but really we want to talk about how all of these things work together to create meaning. And there's two specific pieces of media terminology here that are really important when you start analysing the media. You have the word signifier, which is a specific part or element of the product that gives meaning. And then you have the signified, which is the actual meaning that signifier gives us. So if you look at this image here, it's taken from a horror poster or horror DVD cover, and in the background behind the house is a tree without any leaves on it. It is a leafless tree. So what does this leafless tree signify? And here are some options for you. Does it mean that there's no water in the ground? That it is autumn or winter? Or that death is all around here? Now, the clever ones among you will have realised that actually it can signify all three of these things. It just depends on our interpretation. Some other specific keywords that you'll need when analysing the media are denotation and connotation. Now these are different ways of exploring what something means. A denotation is the obvious or direct meaning something has. So for example, if you see a police car in a media product, it would denote that the film might be about law and order. The darkness in an advert can provide denotations of nighttime. We can denote that the room is occupied because of the red cross. If you've ever been on an aeroplane and you go to the toilet on board and there's a red mark across the door, you know that means somebody's in there. And this image here could denote that there is a toilet over there. Moreover, it tells us that it denotes that it's the gents' toilets, the male toilets are over there. Connotation is also a word that tells us about how something expresses meaning. But this is the hidden or implied meaning of something. Think of it like a suggestion. So if on, say, a bottle of alcohol you see the words established 1816, this has a connotation of expertise and quality. It would denote that the company that has made this is old, they've been around since 1816. But the connotation, the suggestion, is that therefore they are a good quality brand. If you see, say, blue mist on a film poster, that might connote ghosts and spirits. It would suggest or imply that there's something paranormal going on. If you saw a shadow within a media product, this could connote enigma, mystery or fear. And also, if you saw a sign like this, a warning CCTV sign, now that would denote that somebody has cameras up, but it would connote that there may be something valuable in the house, or maybe the owner is paranoid. So connotation is much more about the implied or suggested or hidden meaning that something has, that a signifier has, where denotation is the actual obvious or direct meaning. A good way to remember it is denote starts with the letter D, and so does direct. So denote is a direct meaning. Connote starts with the letters C-O-N or con, and it's almost like you need to be convinced of it. You need to be conned into it. So there's a good way of trying to remember which one is which when it comes to denotation and connotation. Now we need to try and apply this terminology to the analysis of a media product. So here we have a DVD cover for the horror film Don't Breathe. If the question we were given, say in an exam or an assessment, was what genre is this film and how do you know, then what we would need to do is pick out specific signifiers and say what we think they denote and what they connote. So we've already said that we think this is a horror, but why is that? So the colour red. Red can signify a horror, as it denotes blood, because blood is red. But it could also connote violence, because the suggestion here is that the reason there is red, especially in the kind of splatter image on the back cover, also on the barbed wire image with the spiky parts to it, the connotation that this red is supposed to signify blood is quite apparent. So there's no actual blood on this cover at all. It's not like somebody's got an injury and we can see it. So it's not denoting blood, it's just connoting blood, which is much more of an interesting way of looking at how this product is trying to convey meaning. You can see there are eyes at the top on the front cover there, just above the house, and that would denote that someone is watching them, because that's what eyes do, and it's above them, so we can denote. It's direct, it's quite obvious that it's like somebody is watching these people come into this house. But the connotation then is that they are in danger, that something's going to happen to them. There's a need for them to be watched. The house, on its own, can signify the setting of the film. The positioning and the camera angle make the house look big. If you look at the relation between the characters and the house, the long shot of the camera being so far back and the position of them in kind of the middle ground with the house in the background, this kind of gives the positioning to make the house look so much bigger than the characters. Now I know a house is bigger than humans, of course, but it's supposed to be more intimidating. So we can denote that the characters are entering an environment that is bigger, metaphorically, than they are. But we can also connote that they are under threat or under danger. Now those three brief analytical points about the colour red, the image of the eyes, and the framing of the shot with the camera work, those are three things that we've said to help us understand that this is a horror. And look how we've used those three arguments. We've said signify, denotes, connotes throughout each of these. And also these are three different arguments. One is about colour, like we said, and one is about imagery, and another is about the technical aspects, like the camera work. Now it's over to you. What other connotations and denotations can you decode or analyse from the signifiers in this DVD cover? Again, we're trying to find things that help us understand the genre of the film. So what parts of this DVD cover tell us it's going to be a horror? A good way of attacking this kind of work is to annotate a media product. Hopefully you're familiar with the idea of annotations from your work in English classes where you say annotate a poem. But the idea is you put the product that you're analysing in the middle of a page and you write bullet point notes around the outsides and around the edges to identify all the things you would want to talk about in your final response. So here you can see an example of that, and I'll just pick out a few of the more interesting elements that I think would be useful to analyse when talking about genre. So for example, we've got the white glow, which is behind the house. And we could argue that this maybe denotes a full moon. We can't see the moon, but at night time this kind of light, you could argue, would denote, directly mean the moon. Now, a full moon is used in a lot of other horror films as well, and is a horror convention, something that is often repeated throughout all horror texts. Now, we have this word here, intertextuality. That's going to come up in a future lesson, but just so you have an understanding of it for right now, it's when one media product borrows meaning from another product. So if we've seen something before, intertextuality is where we kind of steal that meaning. So a full moon is often used in horror films, so we kind of get that meaning within this poster here. You could also argue that the white glow is behind the house. This could connote, suggest, imply that the protagonists or the lead characters have to get through the house to get to the light at the end of the adventure, the safety of the light. They're in the darkness. Moreover, the audience, if you think of the positioning of this, the audience, us as a viewer, we are on this side with the characters, so we have to go through this adventure, this journey with them to get through to the other side of the house and into safety. The eyes above the house we spoke about previously, but this also has connotations of power and control, as the position is that these eyes are above the characters and the threatening setting. It also denotes that there is an unknown threat because we as the audience can see them, but the characters there can't. This is dramatic irony for anybody who does theatre studies. We can talk about the fact that the tree has no leaves. This denotes that it is maybe dying, and that's a good image or a good symbolism for a horror to have things that are in decay or in death. There are no other houses around in this image, so there's a connotation of isolation and danger and fear. When I say isolation, I mean isolation for the characters. It would denote that this house is isolated because it's the only one, but the connotations of an emotional sense of isolation, maybe paranoia, danger and threat comes from that. You can see that the writing, the title Don't Breathe, is all scratched and degraded, which could connote pain and suffering of the characters. The characters are relatively small. Again, this is a connotation of being under threat or at risk. The red, we obviously said previously, can denote blood and therefore connotes violence and gore. So this is maybe going to be quite a gory horror film. Rather than just something to get you scared, this could be quite graphic. We have facial expressions, of course. You can see the woman on the spine clasping her face. She's also on the back. And it's obvious that they are looking at something. So the expression we would obviously denote as being fear, signifying fear. But the fact that we don't know what's causing the fear, we don't know what they're looking at, what's causing them to feel such intense dread. And this is an enigma code. And this is the idea of mystery. Again, we're going to come on to things like that later on. We also have the blue mist and the clouded eyes. They're kind of clouded over. This gives us a connotation of spirits or ghosts or possession or some kind of, let's say, outer body experience. On the back there's a man with a gun, which signifies that he might be the antagonist, so that would be the villain or the character against our protagonists. There's barbed wire. Not only barbed wire, but it's red barbed wire, and this could connote that maybe these characters are trapped or need to break free. There is a tagline as well: this house looked like an easy target until they found what was inside, and that creates more mystery, more enigma to explore and create meaning. Enigma is a very well used convention of horror. Having mysteries and things to solve and not knowing can also be quite a fearful thing. And then we have a silhouette in the top window. You can see it on the front, but it's clearer on the back of the DVD cover in the top window in the loft or the attic. And that single silhouette denotes that the house isn't empty, but also further connotes isolation because it's just one person also being watched. The fact that it's a silhouette, the shadowy nature of it, that could signify death. And again, of course, death is a massive convention, massive, not the right word, is a often used stereotypical convention of horror. So there you have it. There's some basic analysis, just picking out and highlighting some of the signifiers on this DVD cover and giving some bullet point notes about what they connote and what they denote. This process of annotation is basically where you do all of your thinking. This is where you analyze and explore and examine the product and bullet point down all of the things that you want to talk about in, say, a written response. And it's where you would write down the terminology you want to use, like denotes, connotes, signify, and we've got some other words here like protagonist, antagonist, and enigma. And this is this analysis, or this annotation, is where you do all of the thinking and you get all of your ideas down. So the next part is just to put them in the order you want to talk about them, make any combinations or comparisons between some of these elements, and then write it up. So how would you respond to a question on an exam or some kind of written assessment? You've already done your annotations and done most of the thinking and most of the analysis, but now you need to write this up. If you've taken English for any length of time, I'm sure you'll be familiar with PEE, Point, Evidence, Explain. Back in the day it used to be called PQA, or Point Quote Analysis. But the general gist is that you make one simple argument, one simple straightforward point, and this should be no more than a sentence or two, and these should be relatively simple sentences. So here you can see we've got the combination of blue, white and black denote nighttime, with black denoting shadows and the white glow potentially signifying the moon. So that's a simple argument. Now, in terms of media studies, let's say GCSE, that would be getting you somewhere around a 2 or a 3 level, which is relatively low in terms of analysis. You'd need to make a lot of points like that to get your level raised. If you're talking A level, again, you'd be looking around about an E grade for just a simple sentence, or several sentences like that to say therefore it's horror. To get the higher levels and the higher grades, you really need to move on to the second step of this process, which is explaining why that's relevant. So here we have the use of shadows in horror is very conventional, as they signify nighttime and therefore darkness. In this example, the connotation of fear is established as the white glow of the moon, a full moon also connoting horror, is an example of intertextuality. And again, don't worry so much about that, as I'm going to cover that in a future lesson. This highlights the Gothic style of the house and the leafless branches of the tree. The combination of white and black appear to signify death and decay. Now, adding an extra couple of sentences or another paragraph like that, where you explain your point that you've made and you explain how and why that's relevant, that can raise your grades significantly. That can take a level 2 or a 3 at GCSE up into the realms of the 4, 5s and 6s. And at A level it can take an E almost up to a C grade, as long as you're using specific media terminology throughout. So how can we really push this and get this grade or level even higher? A lot of people at this point would move on to another argument. Now, although yes, you do need to explore different signifiers and more arguments, you can actually get more marks out of this point you've already made. And this third stage is what I call mining your response. So you're trying to make sure you maximize every single possible mark you can get out of the point you've already made. I'm sure a lot of you, when you've done writing in the past, have got to a point where you say, I can't think of anything else to say. And actually, if you look back at your work, what you've probably done is just listed all of the things you think were relevant and not actually explain them or mine them for more marks. If you've ever had your teacher say to you, it's good but you need more depth or more detail, this is what they mean. They mean explain why it's relevant and then mine it for more relevance or more reasons that it could answer your question. So the white and blue could signify ghosts. See how here we are still talking about the white and blue, but we're talking about it maybe signifying something else, ghosts and spirits, as they connote paranormal activity, which we have seen in many other horror films. So again here we've got the word signify, we've got the word connote, and we're saying how else it might be relevant. And then finally, before you move on to your next point, it's always useful to have a simple sentence to kind of link back to the question, to make sure you've actually answered the activity, the task, the question you've been asked to do. So for here, for example, we have the colour scheme has strong connotations of fear, which helped to make this a successful example of a horror genre. So you've got these stages to your written response. You've already done the thinking and the annotations and the previous task where you've annotated it. Now you're just picking some of those annotations and exploring them, making a point, explain why it's relevant, mine it for as many marks as you can, and of course that third step you can repeat. You can mine it again and again and again until you exhaust all the possible relevance that point you've made has, before making sure you answer the question and then moving on to another argument. As always, now it's over to you to put these skills into practice. Here we have an advert for a Colgate toothpaste. Now, the first thing to do is to annotate it. Now, as I said before, you can put the product in the middle of a page and write your notes around it, or you could do it in a table like this. So here we have a particular list of signifiers, things that I felt were relevant or important to the meaning this product is trying to create. And then I explore the denotations and connotations. So this might be an easier way for some of you to attack the task, or you might want to do what we did before, where you put it in the middle of a page and annotate around it, or even a combination of the two. Spend the next 10 minutes trying to come up with the denotations and connotations of specific signifiers that you feel are important within this advert. Now you've done your analysis and you've done all of your thinking, coming up with all your signifiers and what you think they might denote and connote, it's important to try and respond to the question with a written response. So the question is, how successful is this advert at presenting the product in a positive light? The product being the toothpaste. So how to respond, don't forget, we need to make a simple point, a simple sentence, explain why it's relevant, mine your response for as many marks as you can, and then use all of that to answer the question. So I'm going to give you around 10 minutes to do that, but of course you can always pause this or return to this at a later date. If you're taking A-level, then the following few slides go into some of the more academic theory that you need to be successful with your course. If you're taking GCSE or the Level 2 BTEC course, then you can skip the next few minutes of the video until you get to a slide where you no longer see the image at the top left that says A-level only. So here we have our media theorist for this lesson, which is a man by the name of Ferdinand de Saussure. And he's known for linguistics and semiotics. And as you can tell by the image of him, this is quite an older theory and that has been with us for quite a long time. This is where we get the word semiotics from, which is part of this lesson. So semiotics is the study of signifiers and their meanings. And he has some general thoughts about how signifiers work and how meaning is created. Don't forget that I have basically boiled down this man's life work into just a few bullet points here, so you should always try and read around the subject and find out more information for yourselves, and you can read Saussure's work on his course in general linguistics. His general thoughts are, in most cases, the link between the signifier, so the thing we're talking about, and what it signifies, or the signified, is arbitrary, which means there's no real link or no real connection. We've kind of just made it up. He also says that meaning is interpreted, but it is based on the signified, not the signifier. So when we look at a media product, we're not looking at the signifier and saying that's the meaning. We're looking at what that thing, that signifier, is pointing to. And the thing it's pointing to, the meaning it's trying to direct us at, that's what's important. And he also says there are 3 different ways that this works, and we're going to look at those over the next few slides. Starting with something relatively basic, when you're on the road and you see the traffic lights, what does it mean when one of the lights is green? Well, we all know that green means go. But why? Why have we as a society said that green is the colour to mean proceed, that it's safe, you should go, it's your turn? Why? Why is that the signifier that we use? Why don't we use purple, or why don't we use blue, or any other colour for that matter? So there is no real reason. The reason is we've decided as a human species that green is the most appropriate colour to signify go and it's your turn. So when the meaning of something comes across and there is no real link at all to what it signifies, then Saussure would call that a symbolic signifier. So when it's acting symbolically, it means there's no real link to the signified, no real link to the meaning, or no inherent meaning, no built-in meaning. The meaning comes from the fact that we as a human society have just decided it. So we learn it. We learn what it means throughout our lives. Our parents, school, and society tell us that that's what that means, and that's why we understand it. So that's fairly straightforward, the idea that sometimes what's the signified of a signifier is just symbolic. We've just decided. And this can be cultural, this can be societal, and it can be different depending on where you are in the world as well. So that can cause confusion, and that can make media products actually be misinterpreted. If we look at a media product that was made, say, in a culture or a country vastly different to our own, then we may not understand it because we don't get the symbolic signifiers that are used within it. However, meaning isn't always created through symbolism and through learning what things mean. Sometimes the meaning is signified because of something that we wouldn't have to be taught. So here we have 2 doors. Let's say we're in a restaurant and you can see these 2 doors and you really need a wee. Now, which toilet door would you go through? You can see the one on the left here has a triangle with a circle on top, and the one on the right has a square or rectangle with a circle on top. So there's no connection, really, between those images and the concept of gender. Now, we would interpret them as being items of clothing, a dress and trousers maybe, but it's not a picture of a male and female. It's not anything specific to do with a male and female. I mean, if you're thinking about items of clothing, you know, wearing a piece of material around your waist and wearing trousers is not unique or specific to any gender. It never has been. Women wear trousers, men wear kilts at the very least, but obviously tribal societies and cultures have always used cloths to wrap around themselves. So that's not really any meaning to do with gender. But we would all pretty much know which door would be most suitable for us. Not getting into the arguments of gender fluidity and gender dynamics just yet. So in this instance, Saussure would say that the imagery here, the pictures we see, are acting as iconic signifier. It's like an icon, a graphic, a representation of something. So it's almost like it's twice removed. This image of a triangle with a circle on top is representing women because it is signifying traditionally female clothing, and therefore that is signifying female as a gender. Bearing in mind there's actually nothing on here that suggests that these are toilets. The only thing that tells us that these might be toilets is the fact that we are used to having two doors next to each other, one for men and one for women. So again, the placement of the doors can be iconic as well. But it's an imitation or resemblance to something that has meaning. Lastly, Saussure explores the idea of an indexical signifier, and this is where the signifier you're talking about is caused by what it signifies. The signified is the causal event of the signifier. So a lightning bolt can signify a storm because a storm creates lightning bolts. The signifier is caused by the signified, and storms can cause damage and destruction. Therefore, a lightning bolt could signify misfortune or destruction or death because destruction and death is caused by a lightning bolt. So you can extend this significance as many times as you need. A lightning bolt can signify destruction because storms cause destruction and a lightning bolt is caused by a storm. So you can follow that loop all the way through. But the idea is there is a link, there is a direct link, an inherent built-in meaning of some signifiers because they refer or signify something indexically. So let's take a look at that in a little bit more depth. The main thing to remember is that a signifier is only really relevant or worth analysing in context. So to say a lightning bolt means something, well, a lightning bolt can mean many, many different things. And a lightning bolt can also be an indexical, symbolic and iconic signifier depending on what the intentions of the producer were, or also the interpretation of the audience. So let's stay with this idea of a lightning bolt. When a lightning bolt is intended to signify something negative, something dangerous, a storm or damage, then we would say it's acting as an indexical signifier, like we just explored on the previous slide. However, if you see a lightning bolt in the hands of a muscular man in the clouds, and he looks like a god with glowy eyes, then the lightning bolt can be a symbolic signifier of magic. So the lightning bolt can still signify magic and power and gods, but in this case it would be symbolic because there is no real link between the idea of magic and gods and lightning. Lightning is a natural phenomenon, gods and magic is entirely made up, but still it's the idea of it being linked to that or having meaning that shows us that. But it's completely symbolic. We've learnt that throughout our lives, that that's what it can reflect and represent. Whereas if you use a lightning bolt in, say, a science fiction film, here we have an image from Back to the Future, a lightning bolt can signify science, technology and time travel, and that's iconic because we think of lightning as being electric. So a lightning bolt is actually signifying electrical power. These are very two different things. You never actually see electricity in terms of electric power when you plug something in or through the cables on the poles across the streets. So it's a representation of something. It's iconic. It's a link that has been generated without a direct meaning. So if you think about it, a lightning bolt is just an electrical discharge between the atmosphere and the ground, but it is rarely used to actually signify that, especially in the media. I suppose if you're watching a weather report, if you're watching the weather at the end of the news and they've got a lightning bolt on the map, yes, that is to denote a storm or lightning will be there, an electrical discharge between the atmosphere and the ground. But there are rarely any other examples in the media where a lightning bolt is actually used to signify lightning. It is most often used to connote something bad, something powerful, or something technological. So the signifier and what it signifies can actually be attacked in these three different ways, according to Chaucer, who is a structuralist. And we're going to talk about structuralism in a future lesson. When it comes to connotation, implied meaning or suggested meaning, what is being signified is much more important than the signifier. The lightning bolt is not important. What's important is what the lightning bolt is trying to mean, what it's trying to connote, what it signifies. It's really important to try and practice our skills and to try and use the terminology that we've been learning. So here we have a film poster, a horror poster for the film The Woman in Black. In the background, on the right hand side, you can see a cross. Now, to keep this simple and to keep this a manageable task just for today, what does that cross signify? Now, you can attack this and analyze this in three different ways. You can talk about what it might mean as an indexical signifier, as an iconic signifier, or even as a symbolic signifier. So I'm going to give you a few minutes now just to try and jot down your thoughts and to see if you can work out what that cross can denote and what it can connote. Start by writing down your thoughts about that and then try and see if you think what you've written would be indexical, iconic, or symbolic. Don't forget the cross could signify many things. To give you an example of how the cross could be explored using Saussure's work, I've included my notes here for you. So if you were to say the cross denotes a grave or that someone's buried, you could also denote that they were Christian, then you would be talking about this as an indexical signifier. The signifier is a result of the signified. So it's signifying that someone has died, and that has caused this gravestone to be there. So saying that it denotes death, because it's a gravestone, you would say that it's indexical. You could also say that it connotes suffering and pain due to any of these stories within the Bible, Jesus being crucified. In that respect, it would be iconic because it is intended to, that image of a cross is intended to represent the cross from those stories and the suffering of Jesus Christ, which is why Christians wear a cross around their neck often, and it's to show that they have sympathy and understanding for the suffering of Jesus Christ. So a cross can signify suffering and pain, and in that point it would be acting iconically because of Christianity. You could also argue that the cross connotes ghosts because it denotes death. It also has associations with exorcisms, especially due to other films within the horror genre such as The Exorcist. This is an example of intertextuality, of course, and again, don't worry so much about intertextuality if you're following these lessons in sequence, because we haven't quite got to that yet. That will come up in a future lesson. But if you wanted to argue that the cross signifies ghosts or connotes ghosts and connotes spirits as it does denote death, we would be saying that's symbolic because we've learnt or been taught or told that throughout our lives that, and if you think about it, it does all come back to Christianity. Christians believe that when you die, you go to heaven or hell. You have a soul that exists outside of your physical form once you die. Therefore, we have this idea of ghosts. This is the main basis of the idea of the paranormal. Whether you believe in religion or not, the idea of ghosts comes from the idea of having a soul, and largely from, in Western culture, the Christian religion. So saying that a cross, a gravestone, can signify a ghost, you wouldn't be able to say it was indexical because it's not causal. A ghost isn't caused by death. A ghost is caused by you having a soul, allegedly, of course. And so, but you could say it's symbolic of ghosts. The key to being successful with analysis is practice. It's like if you want to be the world's best footballer, you have to kick that ball thousands of times. If you're really good at a particular computer game, all you have to do is look at how many hours you've put into playing that game, and that would explain why you're so good at it. So analysis is exactly the same thing. The more you do it, the easier it gets, the better you become at it. So let's put it into practice. Here we have a Nike advert. This is for women's sport clothing. How successful is this advert at persuading the audience that it is a worthwhile product? So basically what we're saying is, how good is this advert at selling this gear to women? So what you need to do, of course, is explore the signifiers, the important elements of the product, and talk about what it denotes and what it connotes. And if you're A-level, obviously you want to be referencing the different types of signifier. And if you are GCSE or level 2 BTEC, then do not worry about when I say the type of signifier. So you can start by doing this whichever way you found the easiest so far. You can put the product in the middle of a page and annotate around it. You could do a table like the one here with the different signifiers and some denotations and connotations next to it, or a combination of the two. But don't forget, the first step is to actually do your analysis. It's to come up with your thoughts, to do the thinking, and try and include the terminology where you can. If you need a little bit of extra help, I've listed here some of the signifiers that I think are important. There's actually more hidden in here than you might think, so be as creative as you can. So let's spend the next 10 minutes or so trying to just do our thinking and start our basic annotations and analysis. And finally, now you should be ready to write up your response in a written exam style manner. So we'd be talking about full sentences and full paragraphs. So how successful is this advert persuading the audience that it is a worthwhile product? So about 10 minutes would be an ideal time to spend on writing up one or two of your main arguments. So look back at your notes, your annotations or your table, pick your two strongest arguments about why it's a successful product and try and write them up. Obviously you can do more than two if you want to spend more time on this, but within 10 minutes you should easily be able to write up at least two, but bearing in mind you've already done the thinking, you've just got to write them up. What I will do is just give you a quick example of how I would have attacked this task with one argument that I would make. So I would talk about the significance of the blue and dark light in the kind of main colours of the image. So the blue, dark to light fade at the top of the advert signifies a cloudless sky, although there is actually a little cloud just above her knee. I could talk about that later on. This denotes that it is a clear day and good weather, which in turn connotes clarity of vision and clear-mindedness. This could also connote health and fitness, as there is no pollution, denoted by the lack of clouds. And what I meant by talking about the cloud later on is I could say the only kind of elements of cloud, or the only thing that contradicts what I've just said, is directly above the city. And she is actually placed, because of the camera work, above the city, above the smoke, above the toxins, if you like. Audiences may be persuaded that purchasing this workout gear will help them be more motivated, determined and healthier. So just to clarify on the point I was making about the position, and to give you another, I suppose, another little bit of help, the position of the woman running above the city can connote power and control over urban life. The blue colours denote clarity, nature and freshness, and this could connote healthiness. This also got the words move more on it, and that can have connotations that these clothes actually make the wearer more motivated, whereas the words move better denote that the clothing will actually make you a better athlete or more effective athlete. So there's quite a few things there that you can talk about, and what I was doing at the end was kind of mining my first argument and seeing where it led me. So spend the next 10 minutes and try and write up some of your responses. So that brings us to the end of our first lesson of media analysis, and hopefully you've got a basic understanding at least of what we mean when we say analyse the media. We're talking about finding meaning, the signifiers, the connotations and the denotations. Just so you know, the title Semiotics and Analysis, well, analysis should be obvious, it's the introduction to this idea of analysing the media, and semiotics is the study of the signifiers. If you're doing the A-level, you've got a lot more terminology and theory associated with this term semiotics. If you're doing GCSE or Level 2 BTEC, you don't need to worry so much about the word semiotics. It may appear in your exams, but it's just a fancier way of exploring the meaning of media, or analysing the meaning from media products. So as always, you've got to have a little chance now to explore what you've learned in this lesson. And there's 4 boxes here that we usually have. Can you summarise the lesson? Give yourself a rating to keep track of how much effort and responsibility from yourself you're putting into your education. The key questions, as always, help to link us to our next work. And here we have the answer is. So what question would give the answer connotation? Here we are back at our title slide for the lesson, and as always this is a great opportunity just to clarify and check that we have covered the learning objective and how successful we've been with the basic, moderate and advanced success criteria. So did you detail and learn the specific terminology used for analysing media products? Did you explore different ways to create analytical notes and annotations? And did you actually analyse a media product and use the specific terminology? Here we have the specific terminology that was used within this lesson. Anything highlighted in orange is really just for A-level students. So if you're GCSE or Level 2 BTEC, you don't really need to worry about the orange terminology. If you've managed to finish all of the work within this lesson and you've gone through all of the tasks and activities and you've practiced your skills of analysis and you've done some work on the terminology, maybe made flashcards or some kind of revision resource, then we have an extension task for you here. So here we have another advert. Analyse the Paco Rabanne 1 million print advert to show how connotations create meaning. So follow the same procedure as we've done throughout this lesson. Annotate the advert or make notes on the signifiers that you think are relevant and what they might connote and denote. Plan your response and then try to write at least 3 paragraphs. So that would be 3 different arguments. Perhaps one about the colour, perhaps one about the characters, and maybe one about the writing, for example. Don't forget, it's really important to practice using the terminology. Here we have some examples of exam questions, or moreover how the content from this lesson may appear in your exams. So the first one here, analyse a print advert to show how connotations and denotations communicate meaning. You would of course need to find your own advert for that on the internet. Another question here, what does this part of a media product connote or denote? Again, you'd need to find your own examples and pick a specific part, but on an exam they would do that for you. And lastly here we have conduct a semiotic analysis of the magazine front cover and explain why it might appeal to the target audience. So yeah, again you would need to find your own magazine front cover, but here the wording is really important to pay attention to. Conduct a semiotic analysis. Now for GCSE students that just means everything we've done in this lesson, analyse it. For A-level students it means obviously refer to the theory we learnt within this lesson from Saussure and his 3 different types of signifier. Congratulations on making it through to the end of this lesson, and I'll catch you at the next one.